Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhujale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Bacharani Nivase Shatsuni Vari Baskatara Setarani Vanchakalpa Shubhishakri Pasindubhya Vicha Patita Pavan Vibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. First of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me. This is a really special occasion. I tried to get Shamasundar to come here, but he said, Maharaja's birthday isn't until December 7th. And I said, well, they're going according to the moon. And so he was too busy to come, but I wanted to try and get him here. And he also said, well, Maharaj hasn't even been calling me lately. Because Maharaj is so busy right now and he hasn't called Shamasundar in a long time. So anyway, I wanted to just start out by offering to Maharaj gratitude and thankfulness for many years of friendship and guidance. And I feel so indebted to him for many things. I first met Maharaj. I first met you in 1972. You were cooking in the pits for the Bhagavad Dharma courses in New Vrindavan, and you were very serious about your job, stoking the fire. And then, as the years went on, I moved to New Vrindavan in 1978, and I was so surprised because when I first moved there, they had just bought in New Vrindavan had just bought a brand new house, and Kirtanananda wanted me to live at the house, and it was burnt down by some of the neighbors. It was arson, but I was so surprised at Bascom Avenue when you told the story to your disciples about me asking you to go into the house and get my japa beads that were chanted on by Śrīla Prabhupada. I didn't even at the time, of course, think how dangerous it could be. And you explained how there was big fireballs coming down the stairs. And your disciples came up to me afterwards. How could you ask Maharaj to go into your house? Of course, it was an emergency situation. And all I was thinking about is, oh my gosh, I forgot my beads. But I had a little infant at the time and a 2.5-year-old. And so I was trying to and there were 2 feet of snow on the ground outside. I was just trying to get everybody out of the house. The other, Maharaj, I have so much gratitude to you for the many opportunities you've given me by stopping by our home and having prasadam at our home and having some programs. It's been really very special for us. And when you met Robert, my husband, he gave you one of his favorite feathers. And since then, you've sent me pictures that feather is on your altar in Chicago at your home. And I am so grateful that you have always been so kind to him. One of the things, though, that really stands out to me is that you always have been there for devotees that have been passing away. This is just one of the things amongst many of your accomplishments, but I had a really dear god sister, Kunti, in New Vrindavan. She was one of the best Sankirtan devotees who collected a lot of Lakshmi for New Vrindavan. And you were totally there for her at the time of her death. She is the mother of Karnamrita, who's very famous kirtanier. You also took time out of your schedule, 3 weeks, to spend with Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj before he passed. And you were holding his hand. And there's so many wonderful stories about you being there for Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. One time you also flew, even though there was a volcano, you flew to England to be at the side of my god sister, Amekala, who was passing away, and she asked you to please be there when she passed. And you made sure that even though there were no commercial flights going to England at the time because of the volcano smoke, but somehow or other you made it there on a private jet. Another really touching moment for me was when I was at Chowpatty and one of your disciples, Stoka Kṛṣṇa, was passing, and you had so many wonderful stories about him, and you were so there for him. It was such an amazing experience. So that's just a few. I don't want to take up too much time because I know this is, your disciples want to make offerings to you, but again, thank you. And I have so much gratitude for you being in my life, and I have always considered you my younger brother because you are 3 weeks younger than me. And I got initiated before you, even though I was also there for your sannyas initiation. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Vanchakalpa Tubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you so much for inviting us here on this special occasion. It's something I don't take for granted, but I always look forward to. So I've just been, thinking of your Guru Maharaj and the things I appreciate about him. And you've mentioned how he's so personal and about the chapatis. And it reminded me of, I got a tour of the kitchen in Vrindavan the last time the yatra was in Vrindavan. And my favorite part of the whole thing was going into the room where dozens of women were on the ground, all rolling chapatis together. It was such a sweet vibe. They were, I couldn't understand what they were talking, but they were so meditative in their service. And I can see how, and again, it was probably 10,000 devotees they were rolling those chapatis for. So Maharaj continues that. It's wonderful. It's really sweet. And I think I've mentioned this before, but the fact that whenever I see him with someone, or he speaks to us, he speaks to me, he's always so present. He's got so many things going on. And yet, in that moment, he's so present with whomever he's with. And he's got a great memory. He'll remember things, about this person. And I'm always really admire that and impressed by that. He's got a great sense of humor. And I so appreciate that about him too. One dish I made for him once was a tofu frittata. And so then after that, he was calling me frittata mata. and it was when you went to Kankā's house, right? Kankā has beautiful property, and they went for a hike in the woods, and there's redwood trees up there. And Maharaj found this big, long piece of bark. It's probably about 7 or 8 feet long, right? Yeah. You brought it back home to our kutir. And it's there. It's up against the wall, and it goes beautifully because there's a lot of wood, and it's a earthy green color in Prabhu's kutir, and it's up against the wall in the corner. So we have this constant reminder of Rādhānatha Māharaja and his love of the redwood forests and his time at Kankā's place. So it's just little things like that. And then, of course, there's all of you who emanate his mood of service and his personalism and his devotion to Śrīla Prabhupada through thick and thin. And I want to appreciate all of you for that as well. Thank you for taking shelter of him, for following his instructions so nicely, for preaching, for doing all you can to assist your Guru Maharaj in his service to Śrīla Prabhupada. I know he appreciates it, and I appreciate it as well. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunditam Dina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. It's great honor to be part of this Vyāsa-Pūjā celebration and to remember the status of the most exalted of devotees, Śrīla Rādhānatha Swami, on this day, who is a representative of Śrīla Vyasadeva in this world. In the third canto of the Srimad Bhāgavatam, we learn how the living entities who are in the material world have been here for so long that Prabhupada comments how they've been here since previous kalpas. In the lifetime of Brahma, which is 311 trillion years, there are ways in which each living entity then goes through billions upon billions of births in various species of life over 300 trillion years, but that's not the first time. They've been through it in previous kalpas. Therefore, Prabhupada uses the term, the soul has been in the material world since a time immemorial. What's more, he says that it's impossible for an individual soul to trace out the beginning of when he came into contact with material nature. And he also comments in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 13th chapter, that it's not important to trace it out. What is important, although he says Krishna knows, but it's not important for the living entity to know. It is important to know, however, that one way or another, we've slipped into this, or more accurately, fallen into the grips of the material energy. And when Brahma recreates the universe, he has a thankless task of offering the complete illusion with various coverings so a living entity can feel part of the material world, even though asango hyayam purusha, the Vedas say, little jiva, you have nothing to do with this world at all. Somehow or other, you've fallen in here. And Krishna, respecting the free will of every soul, gives an opportunity for complete immersement in the illusion that one is separate from the Lord. And this leads to a great suffering, the great suffering of the soul in the material world. Bhayam dvitiya binibeshatasya ishad apetasya viparya yosmriti. When the living entity is turned around from his real interest, which is to be a servant of Krishna. Jiv Krishna Das e bishwas karle Torah duko nai. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, you only have to remember that you're a servant of Krishna, and then there is no more unhappiness for you. And the soul who is turned around from understanding his, or he's turned around from his situation as the admirer of Krishna, then becomes a competitor and thinks that God's out to get me, if there is a God, or there is no God. And then there's this sense of being separate from God, or dvitiya. And because of that, bhayam syat, the fear arises. And this fear follows every living entity like a shadow throughout every body, material body that he takes here in the material world. So there's a necessity in this world, and it is Krishna's desire that each soul be delivered from this illusion of being separate from Krishna and to turn around and turn back towards him. Tanmayadat Buddha abhijatam bhaktyaka yesham gurudeva tatma. The verse I quoted earlier, Bhayam Dvitiya, continues by saying this can be done by giving one's full attention to the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the bona fide spiritual master. And in the 11th canto as well, it is cataloged by the Navyogendras, the various sufferings of the material world and the way that one becomes entangled here. And they conclude by saying, therefore, one must find someone who is already freed from the illusory condition of life and is already engaged in Krishna's service fully, without any other consideration. Tasmad gurum prapadyeta jignasu shreya uttamam shabde parita nishnatam brahman upashamashrayam. This is their conclusion, that therefore, tasmad gurum prapadyeta, you have to find a guru, someone who's fully absorbed, whose guru means heavy, who's not pushed around by the senses. Jignasu shreya uttamam, and you should ask from such a person, how can I achieve the goal of life? How can I practice in such a way that I can come back to my original condition of being eternally engaged in Krishna's service and in his presence and in the presence of the devotees? And such a person, Brahman Upashamashrayam, should be selected among those who have taken, as Prabhupada said, a dip in the transcendental ocean of knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and such a person would be fully immersed in that absolute truth without any other consideration. And this is the only process mentioned by Kṛṣṇa for one to become free from the material world. There's an absolute necessity to come in contact with the guru who is fully immersed in Krishna consciousness, who is wise, who follows the path of Krishna through the Shastras, and who's a representative of Śrīla Vyasadeva. This is the purpose of Vyāsa-Pūjā, is to remember how Krishna reaches out to us. It's not a fan club, although that element is always there because it's natural for everyone to gravitate towards someone. Unfortunately, every living soul in this world gravitates generally towards someone who's got a position of authority, like bees. They find a queen bee and they're quite happy working all day long for the queen bee. I don't know how much Vedic knowledge a queen bee has, but probably not much. We also discovered a nest of ants recently, and they're also quite active and enthusiastic to serve the queen of their hive. Countries around the world put someone forward and say, lead us. Whatever qualification the person does or does not have, that's a topic for investigation. But one must investigate for oneself and find that person who is fully immersed in the wisdom of Śrīla Vyasadeva. For Śrīla Vyasadeva is the person who brings the intervention that can free us from the mire of material existence. Maya mugda jivara nahi swata Krishna gyan jivara Krishna koila jivara kripaya koila Krishna Veda Puran. That nobody comes out of the coverings of ignorance that Brahma's created for us to be an illusion willfully, unless one comes in contact with the knowledge of Śrīla Vyasadeva. Maya mugda jivara nati swata Krishna gana. It's not swata or automatic that one comes out. Jivara kripaya koila. Therefore, out of mercy, Śrīla Vyasadeva has come to speak the Vedas, to present the Bhagavad Gita. And on the day of Vyāsa-Pūjā, we worship that rare soul, in this case, His Holiness Śrīla Rādhānatha Swami, who has the qualification to carry forward that knowledge for our benefit. We could be a bunch of ants just following the queen ant. I hope that's accurate, and I'm not offending ants everywhere. I think that's what they do. I know bees do, and human beings certainly do it, and it's the nature of the soul to do it. So the greatest fortune, Brahmanda Brahmete Kun Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij, is when we're wandering and we come in contact with someone who's actually qualified, that meets these qualifications. So how rare is it? It's so rare. Prabhupada commented once from some Puranic citation that a sea tortoise swimming in the ocean happens to come up at a time for air, and then there's a log or a board floating, and that tortoise just happens to pop his head through the hole and then it takes his breath. And so rare is it to come in contact with a bona fide representative of Srila Vyasadeva, who fits the qualification, Brahmanyu Pashramashrayam, Tasmad Gurum Prapadeta Jignashu Shabde Parecha Nishnatam, fully absorbed and equipped to educate anyone about the process of self-realization and attaining love for God. So that's the great need of the world. And all of you, all of us are very fortunate to have this nucleus, the Śrīla Rādhānatha Swami. The whole world is fortunate to have someone who decidedly serving Krishna with no other motive, with no other consideration except for to carry on the same mood and method that he received from his spiritual master, and to show mercy to others. And how Maharaj is engaged in this way, and the need for it is in a verse from Prahlāda Maharaj's prayers that I'd like to enter into evidence at this time. Naitan manas tava katasu vikuntanata sampriyate durita dushtam asadu tivran kama turam harsha shoka vaisesika tasmin katam tava katim vimrisham radina. Do you remember that verse? Only one person said yes? You have to go over them again and again, otherwise you remember them and then forget them. But this verse is very important, and it's brought up by our acharyas, for instance, Jiva Goswami, and he talks about how Prahlāda Maharaj is saying, how will we be able to remember you, or how will we be able to engage in Krishna Katha, because our minds are so affected by, this is Prahlāda Maharaj speaking, my mind is so affected by these lower modes of material nature. Naitan manas tava katasu vikuntanata. How will I be able to speak about Krishna in Vaikuntha? Sampriyate durita dushta masaru tivram. It's all bad stuff coming through my mind, and I'm attracted to hearing everything else except for Krishna Katha. Harsha shoka vaisesika. I'm filled with hankering lamentation. So in this condition, he's saying, Tasmin katam tavakatim vimrishami dina. How will I be able to remember you? How will I be able even to take up the process of Krishna consciousness with all of these detriments, with all these obstacles? And if it all resonates with you, then I feel the kindred with you, that there's a default mode that the mind goes to in this mature world. So how will that take place? It is by the mercy of the spiritual master. When we find a spiritual master who's only interested in Krishna Katha and only speaks Krishna Katha, then we also feel inspired to hear and chant and walk in the footsteps. And one of Śrīla Rādhānatha Māharaja's habits is that every morning he listens to a lecture of Srila Prabhupada. And then later, if you sit down with him for breakfast or you go anywhere with him, the next topic is what he heard in Prabhupada's lecture. And this is the Brahmanyupashramashrayam, the Shabde Paritanishnatam, the full absorption of the Vaishnav in Krishna Katha. This is one of the first signs that someone is a qualified spiritual master who, when he holds forth, then everyone comes to listen to what? Krishna Katha. There's no politics. There's no business talk. There's no, you're going to be prosperous in the material world. It's all in the same mood as was spoken by Srila Prabhupada. And that's Śrīla Rādhānatha Swami's impetus, that he represents that katha in such a way that we can look at the example as our guru and say, this is how to walk through the darkness of the material world, how to take shelter of Krishna, how to be fully absorbed, and then we become inspired. And we have the inspiration to do so by his example. Another quality of the topmost devotee, whom Prabhupada mentions in the Upadeshamrita, Rupa Goswami mentions, but Prabhupada comments upon, Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta dikshasti che praniti bishta bhajantamisham shushushaya bhajana vignamananyamanya nindari shunya hridamipsita sangalavya. He talks about different levels of devotees. Does Rupa Goswami? Is everyone okay so far? And he mentions somebody who just accidentally says Hare Krishna or says it incidentally or for musical entertainment. You should respect, oh, the person is able to say Hare Krishna. So in one's mind, one should appreciate and offer respects. And then he says, the next level is Dikshasti Chet Praniti Bish. There's one who has understood the science of Krishna consciousness and of chanting Hare Krishna, has taken initiation with a vow. To that type of person, you should go and out of your way to offer obeisances demonstratively. And then he says, then the third level, the highest level, is someone who has been practicing that steadily and without deviation and has come to the position where there's no impetus within that person's heart to criticize others. That's rare because Ishadvesha Samutena Dvandva Mohina Bharat. The whole atmosphere of the material world is surcharged with, or I should say, contaminated with this impetus to drag others down. But if somebody is actually successful in Krishna consciousness, they come to this position where they have no more impetus or they have no more urge at all to criticize others, to drag them down. Such is the character of Śrīla Rādhānatha Māharaja. And I'll give you a rather obscure example, although I'm sure you have many more from your own experience. But I was surprised one day when I was in Māyāpur and I went to one of his classes. It was a smallish type class, if you can imagine such Maharaj giving a class to a small group of devotees. But it was at the Gurukula. And I had gone there, and it was a section of the Bhāgavatam that I had been also reading. It was about the Pracetās. And you might remember when the Pracetās came out of their deep meditation, deep in the water, and they noticed that the whole planet had been covered with trees. They were angry, and they were endowed with mystic power, and that plus their anger, they were able to manifest fire from their eyes. And they started burning all the trees because they said, what did you do? You took over the whole planet. And I had always come to that section and thought, oh, that's odd that they've done so many austerities and they got the blessings of the Lord and Lord Shiva blessed them. And then they came out angry. But when I heard Maharaj's class, he didn't say anything like that. He said, they saw they had so much service to do. And because of that, they were clearing some space, and he honestly didn't touch on it. That the idea that I had caught on, that like, why are they so angry? That fire is coming out of their eyes. And I marked that. And I've marked it other times when he's given other examples, ways in which I've had a conundrum and thought, why is that happening? And then his interpretation is the one that includes the appreciation of that personality from a point of view of their service, and doesn't touch on some conundrum that why were they angry? He takes the root of no criticism. It comes out in subtle ways, and you can't fake that. It's something that arises in the heart of someone who's actually attached to Krishna and actually feels kinship with all souls and feels happy and fulfilled. It's a rare opportunity to find such a person, and those who dedicate themselves by educating themselves about what is a bona fide spiritual master, what is Krishna's instruction about how to serve a spiritual master, and then those who in that category who take up that service are great souls. All of you are great souls because you have a bona fide spiritual master, and in the most heartfelt and enthusiastic way, you've taken up service to him. And the last point I'd like to make is how Maharaj is very considerate of the fact that we're in a very complicated environment in ISKCON. He's been in ISKCON for a long time and has navigated various awkward situations. And when I say navigated, that means he's never taken a stance that because of this, therefore I won't do it. An ultimatum, which many people do. Oftentimes people see something contrary to what they believe should be done, or how people speak, or how they interact with others, and then they say, well, if this is the way it's going to be, I quit. There are thousands of people who have come to Krishna consciousness and then said, oh, I'll quit because it isn't going the way I thought it would go. It takes someone high-minded who has a vision of how Krishna is controlling everything, and how, if one stays to the order of the acharya, the spiritual master, that one way or another things will work out. And even if they don't, you still follow the order of the acharya. And this has been one of the overarching successes of Śrīla Rādhānatha Māharaja, is that he's always deferred to what Srila Prabhupada would want. And he has an inordinate enthusiasm for pleasing Srila Prabhupada. I've noticed it in many different ways. Some ways are evident in the way he appreciates Prabhupada's senior disciples. He goes out of his way to visit them, to worship them, to honor them, to befriend them, to do everything he can to help them. He sees in them Srila Prabhupada's blessing, and he worships that. He sees the places where Prabhupada went and wanted and glanced, the places Prabhupada glanced upon, and where Prabhupada wanted to establish himself, for instance, New York City, and so many complications there. In fact, I had the honor of working next to Maharaj in some of those complicated situations over several years. And I found his enthusiasm to be fixed, and his reasoning behind it. Prabhupada came here. Prabhupada wanted New York City. In fact, Rādhānatha Māharaja pointed out to me when we were in Māyāpur together, he wanted to show me something in Prabhupada's room. So we went to Prabhupada's room, and then he said, look, above Prabhupada's bed in Māyāpur is a picture of Radha Govinda from New York. He said, therefore, we, no matter what, we have to fulfill Prabhupada's desire to make sure that New York City becomes whole again. And despite the fact that he had so many other things to do, he gave his heart and soul to help revive New York, and is continuing to do so. And it's because Prabhupada was there. Prabhupada wanted it, and therefore Śrīla Rādhānatha Māharaja wants it. And that's the power of the disciplic succession as it carries forward. I'll finish with reading just a short passage from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this goes to the way in which one cannot understand the power of a spiritual master, spiritual leader, until you see the effect that he or she has on people. And in the story, in the Antya-lila of Haridas Thakur, who is chanting all day long, and the police constable who wanted to discredit him, who sent a woman there to try to distract his attention, a prostitute. It says this in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Thus the prostitute became a celebrated devotee. She became very advanced in spiritual life, and many stalwart Vaishnavas would come to see her. That, of course, is skipping to near the end of the story, when she came there to try to distract him and to ruin his reputation based on the impetus given by the police constable and some payment. And then Prabhupada writes, stalwart, highly advanced Vaishnava devotees are not interested in seeing prostitutes. But when a prostitute or any other fallen soul becomes a Vaishnava, stalwart Vaishnavas are interested in seeing them. Anyone can be turned into a Vaishnava if he or she follows the Vaishnava principles. A devotee who follows these principles is no longer on the material platform. Therefore, if one's strict adherence to the principles that should be considered, therefore, it is one's strict adherence to the principles that should be considered, not the country of one's birth. Many devotees join our Krishna consciousness movement from Europe and America, but one should not therefore consider them European Vaishnavas or American Vaishnavas. A Vaishnava is a Vaishnava and should therefore be given all respect due to a Vaishnava. And Maharaj inherited that vision and mood from Srila Prabhupada, who is revolutionary, not actually revolutionary, it's what the Bhāgavatam says, but revolutionary compared to the status quo in India, even in the Gaudiya Math, that how could you go hang out with those people? They're mlechas. Prabhupada said, nonsense. You haven't read the Bhāgavatam yet, or you haven't understood it, or nor have you understood Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's path. And then this verse comes. Seeing the sublime character of the prostitute, everyone was astonished. Everyone glorified the influence of Haridas Thakur and offered him obeisances. Purport. It is said, Palena Parichiyate. One is recognized by the result of his actions. In Vaishnava society, there are many types of Vaishnavas. Some of them are called Goswamis, some are called Swamis, some are Prabhus, and some are Prabhupada. One is not recognized, however, simply by such a name. A spiritual master is recognized as an actual guru when it is seen that he has changed the character of his disciples. Haridas Thakur actually changed the character of the professional prostitute. People greatly appreciated this, and therefore they all offered obeisances to Haridas Thakur and glorified him. It's hard to apply to all of you because you're all great souls to start with. but we see in you the power of a pure Vaishnav. You're giving your heart and soul in service to Rādhānātha Swami. And because of that, you've been empowered to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. What to speak of, show qualities that are very difficult to find in this world, the kind of qualities that Krishna recommends we adopt, or that he says are very dear to him. If we can follow the course of Rādhānātha Māharaja all over the world, as Shyamasundar Prabhu once told Rādhānātha Swami and me, when we were driving one time up to Mere Woods, he was telling us the whole history of how the counterculture of the world started. Do you know how it started? Because of Shyamasundar. He was working with a person in the Bay Area called Owsley Stanley, and he was making LSD when it was still legal. I don't know if you know what LSD is, but it's what do you call it? A psychotropic, or it's psychedelic. Okay. It's a psychedelic drug that changes people's perspective of life. So Shyamasundar showed us chronologically how he and another person on behalf of Owsley Stanley had traveled all over America, then all over Europe, and everywhere he went, they were distributing millions of doses of this psychedelic drug, which again, it was legal at the time. And he said, you can trace it. We started the counterculture. He gave lots of evidence. You can ask him about it sometime. In a completely transcendental way, we can trace the path of Śrīla Rādhānatha Swami. Wherever he goes, whomever he meets, whether they be prostitute or come from a South Indian Brahmin family or wherever it may be, he lifts those he comes in contact with to the highest position. Their perception of life, their perspective changes, and you can chart it, just as Shyamasundar can chart the counterculture and how he started it. Although Rādhānātha Māharaja will be the last one ever to take credit for anything because he gives it all to his spiritual master, but you can chart it, and you can see wherever he goes, he leaves a harmonious situation. What's more, he induces devotees to come to this level of only wanted to speak Krishna Katha, only wanted to give mercy to other living beings. And Nirākulā and I are great recipients of Maharaja's mercy through you, because he's empowered you, and somehow or other, we were sitting there minding our own business there in Burlingame, California, happy to be slightly aloof. And then all of you came and lifted us up and continue to do so. We see it as Maharaja's mercy on us. We're forever grateful for all of you. Krishna sent you all here to spread the Krishna consciousness movement, and you're perfectly aligned by following the orders and example of a perfectly pure devotee whom I worship myself and feel grateful for having a friendship with, and I consider that my greatest wealth in life. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.